Hi and welcome to Slick Willy Fly. Today what we're going to tie is the Demon. This is a great little inshore fly. I love the black with very little flash. This is a super effective fly. But what makes this fly something that's interesting for me is that this really fits in the tradition of Slick Willy flies. And what I mean is, for me, what's important is I like to tie flies that are easy to tie, quick to tie, with very few materials, and most importantly, get bites. So what that means in my world is that I need to be able to use the materials that I own to tie a variety of different flies. I'm not a fly shop owner. I don't have any sponsors. There's nobody sending me materials. So what's important for me is that the materials that I select to spend money on are materials that I can use for a variety of flies. And this is a perfect example. In a previous video that was released just a few weeks ago, Redfish Crawler, you saw me use a brush to tie basically the same fly. Today I'm going to use a fiber that I love to tie when I tie bait fish. I have this crystal flesh, and this crystal flesh has quite a bit of flash built in, so I'm going to hand pick out the flash because I don't want all the flash in this fly. I want this fly to be pretty black, and I think that in the backcountry, you know, when I'm going after redfish or snook, and you know, it's a little low light, maybe a little dark water, this is a great fly. I think black is a very underutilized color. Black is one of my absolute go-to for sure. I love black. So materials. What are we going to use? We are going to use crystal flesh, which is a material that you've seen me use several times on other kind of baitfish flies. We're going to use, I tied this olive one earlier with craft fur. This was craft fur. I tied this black one with fin raccoon. I'm torn. I like both. I can use deer hair just to be different. I think I'm going to tie this one using deer body. Just to prove a point that you need to be a little creative when you're watching these videos. Look at the materials you have and figure it out and make it work, and tie something that is going to give you that same kind of results. Now, what you do need to be careful with, craft fur, for example, will absolutely sink better than deer hair. So if I'm using deer hair, maybe I want to go to lead instead of a brass. But I'm going to use so little bit of deer hair in this fly that we're about to tie that it's really not that big a concern. I am going to use lead dumbbell eyes instead of brass. This is brass. So for dumbbell eyes, I have decided to use red, size small. I'm going to use a B10S Stinger hook, which I don't have out. I'll have to pre-prep. I'm going to use a little bit of barred Silli legs for the front because I just think they look good. I'll probably use 4, and this one I only used 2. Here I used 4. I think the 4 looks better, but you know, that's not a here or there. For thread, I'm going to use black. This is 220 denier uni thread, just a good strong thread. I guess that's it. I don't think I have anything else. So I say we take a sip of our cocktail, change the camera angle, and let's tie a fly. Okay, so we've pre-prepped our materials. I'm just gonna go ahead and put a tiny bit of super glue on the hook so it doesn't spin. While I start my thread, if you haven't already, it's a good time to hit that like and subscribe. I like to start my thread in the wet super glue. So I'm going to take my thread into the bend, because when I attach my tail section, I want it to curl up so that it doesn't lay flat on the bottom when this fly is sitting flat on the bottom. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and put my dumbbell eyes on, which those I did not pre-prep, but that only takes a second to grab some dumbbell eyes. Now this is such a super simple slick woody fly. Typically I put them on about the length of the dumbbell eye, just like you saw right there. And I just do a few wraps in each direction. And once I've done a couple of wraps in each direction, then I can make sure that they're centered. I'll make sure that they look nice and centered, and they do. Now I just gonna get them locked in. And the most important are these figure eights where I go under the dumbbell eye and over the hook shank, because that just draws everything tight. I don't have to put any super glue on those now, because I am going to use a little bit of UV resin to finish off this fly. So I got this little patch of deer hair. So I'm just going to take a little clump. I am not going to stack it or do anything special with it. The only thing I'm going to do is pull out the shorts. One crazy long that's got to go. And once I pull out the shorts here, I'm just going to put it on the back of the hook, and I want it to pretty much wrap around the hook. I'm not trying to spin any deer hair. So I'm going to hold it tight as I can, and my length is about, I don't know, a hook shank is probably good enough. Couple of loose wraps. And now I can use my fingers to just make sure that it goes around the hook, just like that. That looks good. And now, because it's deer hair, I'm gonna loosely wrap up all this body. And once I've loosely wrapped up the body, then I can come back and kind of crank it on there nice and hard. And that keeps it from really just getting wildly out of control. You can trim that if you want, but you don't really need to. And that looks perfect. That's exactly the way I wanted that to look. Okay, so material number 2 is my eyes. Somewhere here, I have a little zip with all these eyes that I hand make. I'm going to put a link in another at the bottom of this video on how I make these eyes. So I have a couple of options. I want to use red, but I do 2 types of red, and I'll show them to you. So I actually, yes I did, I pulled out the 2 kinds. So on this particular, I use clear UV resin and a red Sharpie to make that eye. I do it in layers, and the last layer is actually clear, not red. In this version, I actually use ambulance red UV resin, and this is the choice I'm going to have for today's fly. So I'm just going to cut these open. One of the really cool features when you make your own eyes is that you can make them as big or as small as you like. I personally like a little bit larger eye because I think it gives it a little extra something, a little extra touch, if you will. So I'm just going to go ahead and do my side first. Couple of loose wraps, just making sure that I like the length, which I do. That's another thing. I personally like the eyes to come out a little bit farther than most people. Couple of wraps behind the eye. Remember that the fly is going to swim hook up, so you kind of want the eye on a little bit of a slight downward angle. Now I'm going to do the opposite side. And you just have to bear with me. I understand that this isn't the easiest thing to see, but I have to be able to see what I'm doing. So I'm just going to present that, get that locked in, and again a wrap or 2 behind the eye just to keep them flared out. And I think that came out pretty darn good. Alright. So the next material for me is the Silli legs. And for Silli legs, I have, where'd they go? I have some barred Silli legs, and there they are. Now, when I use silly legs, I don't like to break them off. I think it damages too much when you do that. So it takes a little bit, maybe a second longer. But I like to come in with some scissors and snip them off. So 2 silly legs is enough. 1 for each side. So I'm going to take my side first. I just put it on the thread about even. I usually trim the length, so if they're a little uneven, it's not the end of the world. And I go ahead and tie those in. And now I'm going to do the opposite side. Where'd the other leg go? I just had it. There you are. It's funny how quickly materials can disappear. And I'm going to repeat the process on your side. Perfect. Now I'm just going to make a dubbing loop. That crystal flesh EP fiber that we spoke about, I've already prepped it. I've prepped it into about 2-inch sections. So I'm going to go ahead and put in a clump. Now, oh, I need my spinner. I didn't remove all the flash. I left, maybe there's 1 strand, 2 might have snuck in there, a second one. But you can see I've cut it into about 2-inch sections. And I'm just going to go ahead and put in 2 clumps for right now. And once I put this clump in, now I'm going to just use my fingers to spread it out a little. I've put the clump in pretty much centered. And now I'm going to go ahead and spin this up. And all I'm doing there is getting the fibers just locked into the dubbing loop. And now I'm just using a needle to work them out a little. Alright. Gotta make sure that your legs are where they're supposed to be. And I'm going to start wrapping and when I do this, like all the dubbing that I use, I'm going to try and bring all my fibers forward. Alright, so the tying portion of this fly is complete. Now I'm just going to bring this forward, give this a little whip finish, got to clean that up just a little. I won't want to trap these fibers if I don't have to. Beautiful. Little whip finish here. Where's my whip finish tool? There you are. I like using my whip finish tool I think that my whip finishes just come out cleaner. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and put on, because this is a saltwater fly, I'm going to go ahead and put on a weed guard. So I'm going to use a little bit of Mason's Hard Mono. You know, a lot of times you'll see me do all my trim work and then I come back, tie on my thread, and put on my weed guard. But what the heck, we're going to do it right now. I'm just going to go ahead and put a flat spot in the middle because I'm going to use this like a double weed guard. So it's going to come up on both sides of the fly. Okay. So there's the whip finish. Now we have a choice. We can put the weed guard on or we can do a little bit of trimming. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and put the weed guard. The weed guard needs to sit, obviously, facing the hook. So we just present our weed guard after we put the flat spot in it. And I'm going to give it a couple of wraps right there just to get it started. And then I'm going to give it a wrap or two behind. Just like that. And now I could take that and just pull it up into place. And now I'm going to give it a wrap in between. Wrap or two in between, wrap or two in between the opposite side. And that just opens them up the way we like. Perfect. So now the weed guard's on. I don't really need to get crazy tying in the weed guard because we're going to use UV resin. So back to the normal orientation. Actually, I can give this a whip finish right now and just remove my thread. Give it one more just for whatever. Not really necessary, but why not? You know, when you're using UV resin, you don't really need to put a lot of knots in. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do, make sure my Silli legs are where they're supposed to be and out of the way. So what I want to trim is this. I want to trim all these fibers, but not the deer hair. So I got to be really careful that I don't trim the deer hair. So I'm going to just give this a little trim right down the middle, making sure that I come up short of the deer hair. Okay, now for the remainder, I think I need to pull it out of the vise and probably change the camera angle, and we'll look at the remaining trimming of this fly. Alright, so we're back. Okay, so the very first thing I do, let me get some of this out of the way. The very first thing that I like to do is I like to make sure that my rubber legs are where they're supposed to be, as they are. And then I like to spread out the fibers. And I like to take a needle and dig out any fibers that might be trapped. Because they're gonna, once you start fishing this fly, they're gonna find a way to come out anyway. So I'm just gonna come in here and just work out everything real quick. I could tell you that I'm really happy with the way this fly turned out. This is going to be a killer little fly. Okay, so again, what I really don't want to cut is that bucktail, that deer hair. But what I do want to have is I want to have this have a little bit, somewhat of a crabbiness to it. So I like to take the Silli legs in my fingers and I hold them down just like that. And now I'm minimizing the risk that I'm going to clip them. Then I like to take a little bit longer scissor. It doesn't have to be super long, but a little bit longer. And I like to come in at an angle and just start taking away the really long stuff. The really long stuff that's gonna make this not look crustacean at all. I could see that I have more than one flash fiber in this fly remaining. That's fine. That doesn't really, it's not gonna hurt anything. All right, so that side is looking kind of buggy, little crabbish, if you will. So now we're going to work the opposite side. Just remember when you're trimming to trim slow, because once you cut it, you cannot put it back. Just take your time and trim slow. And if you trim something that you didn't want to trim, it's not the end of the world. But I like that. That came out pretty good. So the last thing for me to do is trim the silly legs to a size that I like. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in my vise again. I'm going to I like to trim my legs together. I like, you know, this is all a personal preference. I think that the legs give this a great effect. I often leave them long in the vise. I can always trim them when I'm out fishing. But I would say maybe, you know, about 2 hook shanks from the dumbbell eyes is plenty. And then I have them all in my fingers. I haven't pulled them tight. I just have them pulled enough so they're straight. And I just clip them all one shot. Bam. So now I gotta get something I can show you this fly with. And this fly, you can fish right now exactly the way that looks. That is a wicked little fly with those bright red eyes. That is a cool little bug. This thing in the inshore, I'll tell you what, that'll get a lot of bites. So the last thing I gotta do is a little bit of UV resin, which literally takes a second. And I'm gonna just cover the knot. And then I'm going to make sure that my weed guard is where I want it. I haven't even trimmed my weed guard yet, but that really doesn't matter. I can absolutely leave it long and trim it when I'm on the water. I put a little bit on the dumbbell eyes, as you see there. Now I'm just going to use a little bit of gravity. Get my lamp ready. I'm going to make sure that this opening is open. And now I zap it. And once I zap it, they're pretty much exactly where I want everything. And now this fly is pretty bulletproof. Super happy with the way this came out. And again, you know, it's just another way to use a fiber that I've already purchased for a different kind of fly, and I adapted it into a fly that I traditionally use brushes on. You know, fly fishing is just getting creative, using your imagination, and figuring out what works for you. Now I'll sit here and probably trim this a little longer because I have a disease with trimming. I can sit here and just pick at a fly forever. And I personally enjoy it. It's almost therapy for me. It's almost as good as having a cocktail. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. Good luck catching, and see you on the next video.